Assalamu alaikum, you're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today a very important topic, and that is about the Pakistan-Russia relationship. The Prime Minister during the last 4 months or so, in fact, he has had a talk with the Russian President Vladimir Putin, and also in fact really appreciated him for issuing a statement regarding Islamophobia, where he said that such acts which are totally against the norms and values and ethics should not in fact be there, and respect for the religion, respect for the prophets should be there, and especially he talked about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When you talk about the bilateral relations, they have also improved over a period of time. I would say improved, not 100% right, and according to our sources and our decision makers, they believe that the rivalry between Pakistan and Russia during the Cold War, it's almost non-existing now. But having said that, again, we can't rule out that fact that Pakistan played a very important role with the Americans when we all witnessed the breakup of Soviet Union. Again, talking about the gas pipeline projects, or you talk about perhaps certain other very important developments in the region, talking about the Ukraine issue. I mean, that is something which is, I would say, it has to be sorted out on ASAP basis. Yesterday there was this news on BBC that the British forces have in fact delivered the anti-missile defense system to the Ukrainian forces, just in case of a possible attack by the Russians. But Russians are very clear about that also, but we'll definitely talk about that in detail in our program. But what I'm saying is that engaging Russia, whether is it about the military equipment that Pakistan wants to buy, or is it the support regarding Afghanistan that Pakistan wants to have from Russia, or the Russian role in general in the region, and on top of that, after the withdrawal of the Americans, the kind of engagement that we expect from the Russians and the kind of role we want them to play in the region, not only in Afghanistan but in the region, I think that is also very important. And then having said that, I think Vladimir Putin is one person who means business. This man has been the president, the prime minister, the KGB chief. He has served in the military, and this man knows exactly what's going on in the region and at the global level also. So we'll be talking about that in detail, but before I introduce you to our panelists, our production team has prepared a report. Let's watch that.
Geopolitical shift in South Asia and the turbulence in the world order, specifically after the chaotic exit of the United States from Afghanistan, leaving it on the mercy of plethora of traditional and non-traditional security threats, lead the relations between Pakistan and Russia towards an appreciably positive trajectory. This positivity and regional as well as global identical approaches of both leaders were seen in the recent telephone call between Prime Minister Imran Khan and Russian President Vladimir Putin, in which both leaders discussed a range of issues, including Afghanistan. According to the Prime Minister's office tweets, Prime Minister Imran Khan stressed that a peaceful and stable Afghanistan was pivotal for regional stability and said that he looked forward to President Putin's visit to Pakistan as well as his own visit to Russia at an appropriate time. Moreover, Prime Minister Imran Khan in this call reassured Russian President regarding Pakistan's commitment to collaborate with Russia on the Pakistan Stream gas pipeline project. Kremlin, in separate statements, stated that this telephonic discussion focused on the development of Russian-Pakistani ties in different areas, including trade, economy, energy, and the humanitarian sphere, as well as combating of the spread of the coronavirus infection.
Now to talk about it, let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us Dr. Professor Riffat, Senior Strategic Analyst. Sir, thank you so much for your time, Professor. And on Skype, we have with us from Germany, Helga Zepp Larouche, founder Shiller Institute. And from Islamabad, Pakistan, we have with us Lieutenant General retired Naeem Khalid Lodhi Saab, former Defense Minister. Pleasure to have General Saab, you in the show, sir. And thank you very much for your time, Helga. Now, let me start off from you, Dr. Saab. Now, the relationship between Pakistan and Russia. Sir, obviously, whatever we witnessed during the Cold War period, during the 60s, handing over a base to the Americans to spy upon the Russians, and then the U-2 was shot down, and eventually they got to know that it flew and took off from Pakistan, and we all know what happened after that. Then the Cold War, got at its optimum level, and eventually the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, and whatever happened right after that, after 1979, Pakistan played a very vital role. I mean, we believe that we were securing our own borders and our own territory, but eventually, sir, that resulted in the breakup of Soviet Union. And obviously, sir, whenever I go through the old statements or perhaps a certain, you know, point of views of Mr. Vladimir Putin, who has been at the top-notch appointments throughout, sir. And this man wasn't happy with all that, sir. But now, since maybe he has realized what the current world is all about, and there is this extension of support from the Russians as far as Afghanistan is concerned, or perhaps making Pakistan a member of SCO also, sir. Very important developments. Now, sir, when you talk about the regional connectivity, you talk about the geostrategic issues, you talk about the geoeconomics, perhaps, sir, Russia is also being encircled now, I would say, other than China. Whether you talk about the Ukrainian issue and the pressure that is exerted by the Americans through NATO, or the Russians perhaps, whenever they want to look south, sir, problems are always created for them, sir. Despite the fact that the kind of energy resources the Russians have, they are supplying it to almost all the European countries. But yesterday there was another news that Saudi Arabia has signed a contract with Poland. So slowly but surely, things will be a little difficult for the Russians. I don't think there's going to be a war over Ukraine, but there is going to be some tough decisions, financial decisions perhaps, that will be taken against Russia. So now in these circumstances, the engagement between Pakistan and Russia, what is that supposed to mean?
Well, two things. One is the fundamentally altered geopolitical situation in the region. Russians were watching with a lot of apprehension that the Americans may not leave Afghanistan, which they have left now. And the Russians are very concerned about the continued violence and instability in Afghanistan, which they think that Central Asian states, because they are part of their new near abroad, so they would like Afghanistan to remain stable, and that gives them a direct stake with Pakistan, in which both countries can work together. And apart from the humanitarian crisis, their utmost effort is to seek stability in Afghanistan, because they know that if Afghanistan falls victim to violence again, then that means Russians have to be concerned about it, not only about narcotics, but overall their relationship with the region will become more troublesome. That's one. The second thing is that you mentioned Putin as a long memory. He has been at the helm of affairs for almost 30 years, and during those 30 years, he has very bitter memories of Pakistan having helped the Afghan Taliban, and which led to the freedom fighters, which led to the disintegration of the Soviet Union. And he has repeatedly said that Russia is looking for ways to assert itself as the former superpower. And in that regard, I think Pakistan's role becomes very, very critical, because one of the key issues between Russia and Pakistan was, apart from the Cold War, was the conflict between China and Russia, which led to the 1969 territorial skirmishes. And now that situation has already changed. So the altered relationship between China and Russia has made it possible for Russia to feel a little bit more comfortable when it comes to looking towards south. And they are no longer concerned about the encirclement. Of course, their relationship with the Taliban is very difficult because of their fear that narcotics are being exported from Afghanistan, because of the lack of an authoritative power center inside Afghanistan. But apart from that, the Russians are feeling very comfortable. Now, you mentioned about the low level of trade between Pakistan and and Russia. And the primary reason is that Pakistan does not, because of the COVID situation and because of those reasons, Pakistan does not have much to export to Russia. But Russians are willing to bring their investment into Pakistan, and the prime example is the gas pipeline that the Russians have been working on, and they have expressed an interest in it. But Russia's relationship with Pakistan is also overshadowed by their relationship with friendly relationship with India. So India has some sort of has been allowed to exercise some sort of a veto over how much the Russian would travel towards Pakistan and shake hands with Pakistan, and the Russian leadership is aware of this. In fact, when their foreign minister came to Pakistan last year, he had mentioned it that we are willing to engage with Pakistan to promote trade, investment, and many other.
And that visit was considered to be very successful. And was it, by the way, sir?
Well, symbolically it was, because there were, if you look at Pakistan relationship with Russia today, there are no more fundamental differences between the two countries' strategic outlook.
Okay. That is the key point.
So I would say that the atmospherics and the optics are looking good, but whether the visit, Putin's visit to Pakistan, or our Prime Minister's visit to Russia, if that takes place, that will be a huge confidence building measure between the two countries.
All right. Now, Jalal Sahab, coming to you, I mean, when we talk about the geopolitical convergences, I mean, that is something pretty important. And I'm talking about these convergences between Pakistan and Russia. Sir, what is that supposed to mean for the regional politics? And when we hear our National Security Advisor, Mr. Mueed, he says that we do not believe in the camp politics. So we will be remaining neutral and we will not promote that. But sir, it seems that now that camp, I would say, politics are there. I mean, it's a reality. What do you say, sir? Jalal Sahab, you'll have to unmute it, sir, please.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Perfectly fine, sir. Please go on.
Thank you. So I said that in your intro, you very well covered the ups and downs of a relationship is concerned. But today, I think we have some very important convergences. First is, of course, SCO, where we are there. Second is Afghanistan, where we our attitude is alike, and we want this present regime to become stable and Afghanistan to become peaceful, so that economic activities can start. Then you are aware about the north-south corridor, going up to Indian Ocean and all that. Then Islamophobia, which of course our Prime Minister mentioned. I think if we look at the recent past, the things have changed as far as the Russian attitude towards Pakistan is concerned. We've also felt that Russians are much more reliable than some other friends, because if you see that they stood by Syria all along, between all the hard times and good times, then they are standing by Iran. So I think we should also keep in mind the history of relationship of a country with other countries and with us and all that. So I think this is the time, because as far as Afghanistan is concerned, which is our supreme convergence as far as Russia and Pakistan are concerned, there are three groups of countries, those who have different interests as far as Afghanistan is concerned. America and their allies, those who are looking for this, in my opinion, I may be wrong, looking for this interim regime in Afghanistan to collapse economically and politically. Of course, some of their allies like Germany, they want to come for the help of Afghan people. But the problem is that the banking channels are blocked. So Americans themselves are sitting on the $9 billion which belong to Afghans. And most important thing is the way Americans are browbeating anyone who comes across their way, including Russia, to put sanctions, unilateral sanctions, economic sanctions and all that. I think now countries like Russia, China, Turkey, Iran is already sanctioned, some other countries of Europe and Latin America, Pakistan, they should join hands to challenge this unilateral power which America has acquired about stopping the economic channels through IMF or through World Bank or through banking channels and all that, because otherwise the world, half of the world will remain at the mercy of Americans. Wherever they feel that their interests are not being met, they stop all the flow of money. So China and Russia, they'll have to do something along with other countries. So I think at this point of time, Russia and Pakistan have very close, mutually mutually directional interest as far as this region is concerned. So we have a very good chance of having good relations in future.
Now, so you named 5 countries. Turkey, we all know what Turkey is going through these days. Economic meltdown. Look where their currency is at the moment, sir. 36% depreciation is not a joke. You talk about Pakistan, sir, I don't need to say much, and we all know what's going on, whether through FATF or through IMF or other, related aspects also. You talked about Iran, sir, a country under tremendous sanctions. Russia again, and China being such huge powers, economic giants also. But, sir, at the end of the day, United States of America and their allies, they are the ones who form narratives, and they are the ones who would form an opinion also. Now, under certain circumstances, these are leading to a clear-cut division, the West and Asia. And now, so we all know what is brewing in the Eastern European side, sir. The American or the NATO-led influence is really getting pretty high in Romania, in countries like Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania. Other than Belarus, let me put it this way, sir, there is no support for the Russians on that. They really want the West to stick to their previous decisions and should not move towards East, where they are actually. And this is something which the Russians will not accept. I mean, NATO in their backyard, the softer belly where certain issues could be created, whether related to Islamization or something of that sort, sir. So that statement also in fact came to counter that kind of a threat.
True.
What do you say, sir?
I think you're right, and this Ukraine is all about this. What you are saying, NATO trying to move forward closer to the Russian underbelly, and Russia has shown the resolve that they will not allow that thing to happen. So I think one of them will be blinking. Will just come to know in a month's time or few weeks' time. So all said and done, if you look at the overall scenario, the Chinese affinity with Pakistan and now with Russia also, the Chinese and Russian interest nearly the same as far as Afghanistan is concerned. The Chinese and Russian interest in Iran. So if you look at all around Pakistan, Afghanistan, we have a Russo-Chinese interest. Iran, we have a Russo-Chinese interest. And we have already talked about SCO. We have already talked about the American hegemony that they are trying to resist. So I think all said and done, ultimately our direction of diplomacy seems to be towards East, and Russia being closer to us than the other big power. Of course, China is the nearest. So it is just logical that we should strengthen our relations with Russia and keep moving ahead the direction which has now been carved out.
All right. Dr. Riffat, you want to add something?
I wanted to add a little footnote in terms of NATO's expansion eastward, meaning toward the Ukraine and other countries. In 1994, there was a explicit understanding between Washington and Moscow in which the Americans held out the assurance
that they will not,
that they will not expand beyond that red line, what the Russians are calling today. But
was that in a written format, sir?
Yeah, of course. It has been documented now by so many
because
scholars.
I was listening to one of the experts on this issue, sir, on perhaps CNN or some other channel, and they were saying that the Americans do understand what exactly is the demand of Vladimir Putin. But having said that, now Vladimir wants that it should be in black and white. The assurances should be given, not verbal assurances.
But the reason why Putin is insisting to put those assurances in black and white is because he has already been cheated of the verbal assurances that were given by President Clinton, then the President Clinton to Putin, and the Americans have violated that understanding. So Putin, if he wants, as the West is trying to now anticipate that the invasion of Ukraine is imminent, but I don't think that Putin is may give a posture of committing aggression or committing violating sovereignty of Ukraine, but he knows that it's going to be a costly affair, and he would like the West to give away, to reiterate the assurances that were held out to him in 1994.
I mean, that is something very important.
So it's not entirely Russia's fault that they consider. And during the Second World War, I'm sure our friends from the military would know that the German forces moved into Soviet Russia at the time of the invasion to Ukraine. So Ukrainian sovereignty is ironclad, but if it leads to the violation of the expansion of NATO in such a way that it jeopardizes the security interests.
Sir, obviously Ukraine is the second largest country in the region, sir. It's not a joke.
So I just wanted to
all right.
Correct
so
that
let me also engage now Ms. Helga Zepp. Now, Helga, a couple of points. Since we are talking about Pakistan and Russian relationship, but let's talk about the relationship in the current context. Interestingly, the development that took place in Afghanistan, we all witnessed the American withdrawal and whatever is happening after that. The fall of Kabul was on the 15th of August, and it's been almost perhaps 5-6 months now, but things are getting from bad to worse. Obviously, there's a lot of expectations from the Russian side that should be seen, but currently there isn't much engagement. I mean, there is, but the kind of expectation, I mean, as I earlier mentioned, I mean, they were too high perhaps. Secondly, ma'am, the Western pressure on the Russians, that is something which is creating a lot of problem for them. So, ma'am, do you think at some stage, if this Ukrainian issue is not sorted out on ASAP basis, the previous treaties that were signed between the West and the Russians, I mean, they could be revoked, you never know. These include about the atomic weapons and the missile defense systems and so much more, as we all know. Where will it lead? Because it seems that, ever since America came into being 225, 230 years ago, I mean, they fought one war, that was the War of Independence. And then one attack that took place, I mean, not on their soil, but on the fleet. Right after that, we all witnessed what they did to the Japanese. And then 9/11, another, if it was actually what we all have been told, it's like that. Otherwise, there are a lot of ifs and buts regarding that also. That was the last one. Otherwise, Americans have always fought their wars outside their borders. Europe, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Middle East, Afghanistan, you name it. Yes, Ms. Helga.
I'm not sure if I understood your last question. Can you repeat
my
it?
point is, ma'am, the Americans, I mean, whatever they are doing at the moment, do you agree with the Western philosophy regarding the Russians, or do you believe that, I mean, for example, putting pressures on them, not letting their athletes play, putting bans on them, again subjecting Russia to various sanctions, I mean, and then, for example, Poland, instead of taking gas from Russia, signing LNG contracts with Saudi Arabia, and so forth. I mean, the blocks that are being developed. Let's talk about it, ma'am.
Well, the main problem is that the present military-industrial complex, plus Wall Street, plus the Silicon Valley, plus the City of London, which are the main financial powers behind this effort to keep the unipolar world, they are confronted with the fact that the world is rapidly changing. Russia, which was supposed to be only a regional power, this is what Obama said during his administration. China is clearly rising. Look at the economic figures of last year. China had a GDP increase of 8.1%, while the US had a decline of 1 or 2%. So there is a complete change, and you have now a new strategic alliance between Russia and China, which, contrary to some commentators, I don't think this will break. I think this has grown together in a way. So, you have now the technological advantage in the military field on the side of Russia. They have developed hypersonic and other modern measures, which have basically made the global missile defense system of the United States and NATO not totally obsolete, but it has delivered a severe blow. That military superiority presently on the side of Russia has allied with the economic strength of China. So I think this is a new factor in the situation which drives some people in the military-industrial complex and in the Wall Street and City of London quite to the verge of desperation and hysteria. They have not given up the effort to have regime change. Kazakhstan, was just before the extremely important negotiations between the US and Russia in Geneva, then NATO and Russia in Brussels, and then in Vienna in the OSCE meetings. These were extremely important meetings because they were supposed to discuss the ultimatum by Putin that he wants to have these written guarantees, no more eastward expansion of NATO and Ukraine not becoming a member of NATO. So these were, the whole world, at least at Europe, where the politically conscious people were extremely attentive to these meetings in Geneva, Brussels, and Vienna. And what happens just in the days literally before, you had a cold-blooded attempt to have a regime change in Kazakhstan, where President Putin correctly said, in my view, this was using the Maidan technologies. With other words, Western-financed NGOs were trying to, use a ferment which existed in the population because of the increase of the energy prices, which was a mistake, which was then corrected by the government. But then, like in the Maidan in 2014, you had terrorist elements coming from probably Syria, from Iraq, reinforcing the demonstrations. So then, very quickly, the Kazakhstan government called in the CSTO defense organization, which included a lot of Russians. They immediately could calm down the situation, and the Russians left again. So I think, nevertheless, one has to consider that, the same forces who were behind the Ukrainian coup in 2014 were in principle employed again to make a regime change in Kazakhstan, just at the moment when you had these extremely important discussions between the US and NATO and Russia on the other side. So that shows you the volatility and that there are some forces which are not necessarily President Biden. It's a big question: how much does President Biden really control of the apparatus of the military-industrial complex at each point? But it shows you the determination that there is an effort to have regime change, even in Russia and in China. That has been articulated many times. This was what the Atlantic Council wrote in the longer telegram, where they openly called on the Chinese leadership to replace Xi Jinping. I'm just touching upon these issues to show that there are these forces who are really determined to keep their unipolar world at all costs. Now, that is why, if I may just add that, why I have said from the very beginning, when it was clear that the United States and NATO would pull out of Afghanistan, that, that was a unique chance to try to get some different policy on the table. Because Ukraine is a life and death issue for, all Russia. The East Ukrainians are pro-Russian, are in part Russian. The West Ukrainians want to be part of the West. So that's very difficult to solve. The conflict between the United States and China over Taiwan is also a core issue, which touches upon the very, very basic interest of China. So it's very difficult. But Afghanistan, is also geopolitically very important, but it is not one of these absolute core issues of either of the participating countries. So I have suggested that we should try with all means to get a cooperation between the United States, Russia, China, hopefully some Europeans, and the neighbor countries of Afghanistan to work together to save that poor country, which has suffered 40 years of war, as a way to try to build a bridge. Because if you look how we came out of the Cold War, it was also starting to build confidence building measures in areas where it was relatively easy. Now, this is very urgent because 5-6 months after NATO left, what is the situation in Afghanistan? It is the biggest humanitarian crisis on the planet. The United Nations said that 24 million people in Afghanistan are in danger not to outlive this winter. 8.7 million people are starving as we are talking right now. There are reliable reports from Afghani people from Afghanistan that the people are starving for days and days, and then they are forced to sell their children. They sell their children for $950 to $1,200. That is the price. This is unbelievable. Then they sell their kidneys. They sell kidneys for between $1,200 and $1,800. So, I could go on with that. And I think, this, for me, Afghanistan is the test ground. Is humanity morally fit to survive? Because, this is not something which is happening unbeknownst to anybody somewhere, but it was known to the whole world from day one that if a country like Afghanistan, which had 80% of its budget coming from international aid, that, at the moment you cut that off, which has happened when the Taliban took over, you collapse the Afghan economy. And what we are seeing right now is playing out. And Foreign Affairs just had an article where they say, in all these discussions between US officials and the Taliban in Qatar, for many years, the US were warning the Taliban not to try to take over Kabul with military means or they would be penniless. So now you can see that these warnings were absolute. So there is a geopolitical element in what is happening. And I think this has to be discussed because the victims of this are the Afghan people who are dying. And I have launched
I'll just get back to you,
which I call Operation Ibn Sina, which I really would like you to consider. I'm perfectly happy to send you the link. Ibn Sina, if I just have one more minute, Ibn Sina was one of the absolute most important physicians in world history. He developed the concept of quarantine. There is a beautiful movie from 1956 called Ibn Sina, which discusses this. I want all the viewers to watch this movie because, this was one of the great doctors who wrote a canon of medicine, which 5 volumes, which were the standard work of medicine until the 18th and 19th century in Europe. And he also was a very important philosopher. So I was saying that let's make the name Ibn Sina the synonym for saving Afghanistan. His father came from Bak, which is near Mazar al-Sharif. So that's northern Afghanistan. He himself was born in Afshana near Bukhara, but it's the same region. And I think all the Islamic people look at Ibn Sina as one of the great heroes of your history. So let's make his name the reference point for a collective effort to save the Afghani people. I'm perfectly happy. Maybe we should have a separate program only on Ibn Sina, because I think this idea is really an important concept, because you have to give the Afghani people something to look forward to. After all the misery they went through, they have to have something they can
All
shout
right.
about. And I think Ibn Sina would be just such a possibility.
All right. Now coming to you, Dr. Saab, one important factor, is Islamophobia also. And Vladimir Putin's statement, I think, really gave us a lot of hope that there is a power in the region that supports the ideology of the Muslims, and whatever has been shown, it's not exactly the way it is. The other day, sir, I was following this story about that person who was later on killed. His name was Malik Faisal Ikram, sir. And his wife was living in Texas. He was himself British born. And when that hostage situation, that story was still going on, sir, I was just fearing that I hope this guy is not a Muslim and perhaps not a Pakistani, because that initially they were saying that he wants to make sure that one of the, they were not taking the name of Afia Siddiqui, but they said, well, hostage crisis, 4 people are in the, in this situation, one is a rabbi, and then, this is what, and eventually it came out like that. And it was covered on almost every single channel. Again, a terrorist, a Muslim terrorist. The guy was born in British. He was misled in Britain, but he has got nothing to do with Pakistan. But eventually Pakistan, for some reason, came into this news. So what I'm saying is that whenever we talk about the ideology of the Muslims, Islam is a religion for peace. It has always been, and this is what the basic strength of this religion is. But sir, the way it has been portrayed, whether through the, through IS or other certain, I would say certain groups and all. Now sir, my question to you is that this has become the biggest problem, because if you look at the Central Asian region, sir, starting from Turkmenistan, then Uzbekistan, coming down to Tajikistan, and then so many other, Kyrgyzstan, and so many other smaller Muslim countries also, including Afghanistan, Iran, and Pakistan, and then all the way. Sir, there's a huge population, and this is the belly of the Russians, and the Russians cannot afford. Sir, I'll just add one more thing before your comment. If you remember, sir, when the Sochi Winter Olympics were being held, there was a threat emanating from the Middle East for Russia, sir. And then there was this telephonic conversation which went on for quite some time, and things were sorted out right after a bomb blast in a train, if you remember, sir. Well, so, how do you see this aspect, sir?
Faisal, the Western countries, particularly those countries, including the United States, they have built a certain narrative, and that narrative is based on negative perceptions of Islam. And the irony is that whenever you have an incident like this that you are referring to happening, immediately, the old narrative gets revived. And that is exactly what our Prime Minister is concerned about, that look, do not associate the name of any religion with violence. And unfortunately, the West continues to conflate Islam with terrorist violence or incident like these, and that's a real problem. And I think it goes to the credit of Mr. Putin to have realized the Western hypocrisy when they blame Islam for incidents like these. Also the fact that he himself belongs to the Orthodox Christian faith, but he has been able to see through this game that unless the name of religion, and particularly in the name of freedom of expression, if it leads to the castigation of Muslims in a negative light, then that is something that has to be stopped, and that is something that has to be prevented. So that and in the latest conversation that our Prime Minister had with Mr. Putin, that was a key point that was appreciated by our Prime Minister, and the support that Mr. Putin has lent to Pakistan's effort to deconstruct and delegitimize this Islamophobia about Muslim people is something that that should be welcomed.
That should be welcomed, and it has been welcomed, sir. But you believe that this is the general perception that prevails in Russia for the Muslims, or is it just a statement by the top of the command?
No, there is a larger context to it, that even today in Russia there are 25 million Muslims who live there. Except for the Chechen Muslims, and one can debate whether the Chechens were fighting for their freedom or they were engaging in violence against the as is also happening in Pakistan. They were fighting for their rights, or they were actually hooked into the terrorist organization. So, but for Chechnya, and our German friend has also mentioned the current wave of violence in Kazakhstan, where the Russian lost no time in sending their CSTO troop to
normalize the situation.
To normalize the situation. And once they sent those, because I was reading about it a couple of days ago, when they sent those troops, they said, "Oh, this organization which was lying dormant has now chosen to intervene." But the Russians were very, very wise. They immediately withdrew their troops, and within a week. So when the Western countries intervene in those countries, and we know from Afghanistan that the Americans stayed there for 20 long years, but the Russians were very wise that this can have a repercussion for their reputation, and they helped the Tokayev government to do the cleanup, and they went back. So the Western countries still are believing that Russia was not going to leave, because they were just looking for an excuse to intervene in Kazakhstan. And so we have to understand the dynamics of this Russia's call to the conversation between our Prime Minister and Mr. Putin, in which he rightly identified Islamophobia as the biggest threat to harmony, to peace between countries of different faiths.
All right. So, last quick comment from you, General Saab, and that is about the future of Pakistan-Russia relationship, sir.
Thank you very much. First of all, if you allow, I'll just like to appreciate what Madam Helga proposed to name the operation of helping the Afghan people as Ibn Sina. And I was amazed at her knowledge about Ibn Sina. Thank you very much, Madam, for letting us knowing that and, refreshing our memories. As far as our relationship is concerned, although we are saying that we don't want to become a part of any bloc, but the fact is that blocs are nowadays not necessarily military blocs like NATO or erstwhile, the Russian bloc. Now it is political in nature, diplomatic, economic. We are already part of SCO. We are already part of the group of countries, those who want peace and stability in Afghanistan. I'm talking about Russia, I'm talking about China, maybe Iran, Turkey, Pakistan, Qatar, and the Central Asian countries. So whether we like it or not, we'll have to become a part of that group that actually sees the interest the way we see it, where there's a convergence of interests. And that is, I think, the group we should be joining, whether diplomatically, politically, or economically, of course, not necessarily militarily. And we should try to identify all the spoilers. And please allow me to say, number one spoiler is United States of America, and very closely aided by India. So if you try to bring them in, they will actually spoil the whole thing. This is my view. I can be wrong.
But you can't keep America out, obviously, sir.
Why not? Why not? This is your thinking, not mine.
But sir, at the end of the day, I mean, the decisions which are taken at the top.
This is the fear.
I mean, Russians or the Chinese can't put sanctions on United States of America.
This is the political clout of America. This is the political clout of America. This is their strength of perception management, that you and me are saying that we cannot do anything without America in this world, as if they are the god of this world. They are half the god of this world, not a total god, I think, today.
All right, sir. And last quick comment from you, ma'am. A quick one, please.
Well, I think, the problem is that, I think that humanity needs to move to a new paradigm. I see as the biggest problem right now that if you stick to geopolitics, it can only lead to a disaster. I mean, what do we have? We have a hyperinflationary collapse of the Western financial system. I don't think the inflation will be brought back under control because it's not the result of energy prices or food prices. It's the result of the trillions and trillions which have been pumped into the system after the systemic crisis of 2008. So I think there is a connection between the collapse of the Western financial system and the war danger. And therefore, to say we just, I mean, in a certain sense, you could say that Russia, China, the Asian countries, and most of the developing countries, they could form around the Belt and Road Initiative a new system. And, I think that if you forget about the United States, it could work, except, that I think we have to find a way of, making clear to the United States that they should cooperate. They should
All right.
not go for a geopolitical confrontation, because then you have the danger that the whole thing will go out of control, either via Ukraine or via Taiwan. And, I think we are too close to nuclear war. The Schiller Institute just wrote a chronology about how the Ukraine conflict evolved. I mean, we are on a road to Third World War if we don't find new paradigm. And I think that should be the discussion. How can
All
we
right.
inject in the international debate concepts which pertain to the common aims of mankind, and find a new level of international relations,
All
which
right.
must be in line with the UN Charter and international law. But I think something completely new has to be introduced.
True.
All right. Thank you very much, Jalal Saab, for your participation, sir. And it was a pleasure having you, Helga Zepp, in our show. And thank you very much, Professor Saab. As always, you've been very kind to give time to PTV World, sir. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you, inshallah, tomorrow. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.